Today we're going to jump right in and talk about some of the enhancements for our Enterprise API for the Summer 15 Salesforce release. My name is Jay Hurst. I'm a director of our product management group focused on platform specifically. My teams are in charge of our Enterprise API, which generally consists of our data APIs. So our SOAP API, Bulk API, REST API, Streaming API, all of those, kind of the backbone of all of our API system. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Twitter at ExtraIdea, and you can always email me as well, jhurst@salesforce.com. So before we get started today, I do have to show you the obligatory safe harbor statement. This is essentially saying that Salesforce is a publicly traded company, and some of the features we will be talking about today are future-looking technology. Some of the features will be in pilot mode today and may or may not go GA in the future. If you are making any purchasing decisions, please make those decisions based on what is currently GA and not what is in pilot or future statements. I will definitely try and tag everything that is not currently GA as we go through the webinar, but if you have any questions about what is and what is not GA, feel free to ask a question. So I definitely wanted to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded, so if you miss something I say, you can always catch it later, or you can definitely send it to other people on your team to listen after the broadcast is over. We also have a number of channels that you can contact the Salesforce.com developer community. We're on Twitter at SalesforceDevs. Hashtag anything with Force Webinar, and we will definitely respond and get it to the right group for the webinar presentations. Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Google+, we're also Salesforce developers there. Now, if you have any questions, please do not wait till the end to ask them. In the sidebar of the GoToMeeting panel, you should see a questions section. Feel free to just type your question in there. We have a team who is actively monitoring those questions and responding to them in line, so you will get your questions answered throughout the webinar. And at the end, we'll also do a Q&A where I will pick up any extra questions. Please respect the Q&A etiquette. Don't repeat questions. We're definitely working through the queue, so if you haven't got an answer, just be patient. We'll definitely get to you. And you can also stick around for the live Q&A at the end. For any other questions outside of this webinar topic or post-topic, feel free to go to the developer forums at developer.salesforce.com/forums. So what are we going to talk to today? Kind of a pretty straightforward agenda. We're going to talk about what the Enterprise API is, go through a few new features that we have, Data Loader for Mac, Batching REST API, Tree Save API, and then we're going to end with another feature that was kind of a last-minute addition here, which is the Salesforce connector for Lightning Connect. So what is our Enterprise API? Like I mentioned before, these are our data APIs. This is the way you access your data inside of Salesforce. It consists of our SOAP API, REST API, Bulk API, and our streaming and generic streaming APIs. So this is the way you programmatically get to your data from outside of Salesforce. There's a lot of overlap and shared resources with features like Apex Code and the Ajax Toolkit, and we own parts of that, and other teams own parts of it as well. But for the most part, anything that you do through the API will be ultimately owned by my team, at least from the data perspective. Tooling API, metadata API, chatter API, those are owned by their respective teams. We also own a few extra odds and ends. So we own the data loader at present. We'll be talking about that in the future of the data loader. We own outbound messaging, our Ajax toolkit, like I mentioned, and our replication API. And a few others that are too long to list here. So we'll jump right in the data loader for Mac. So for those of you who have been with Salesforce for a while, I'm sure you've seen the data loader. It is a Windows client-side application you can install on your machine that will allow you to take CSV files, upload them to Salesforce to mass import your data, either through the SOAP API or the Bulk API. Additionally, you can run large queries, pull those out into CSV files as well. This is all done over our SOAP API through our partner WSDL. So it's our loosely typed WSDL, which will allow you to connect to any organization using the same set of code. It's not custom to any one org. Now, we've had support for the Windows client for a long time now, about 9 years, I believe. And one of the biggest questions that we've had from my team over the last 4 years have been, please support this for Mac. So as you can see in the little screenshot, this is one of our largest comments, and actually it's from 6 years ago, which is, please support the data loader on the Mac client. It's received over 16,000 ID exchange points, so it was definitely our largest ID exchange, and we were remiss to take so long to get to it. But I'm going to jump into a quick demo here to show everybody how it works. Like I said, if you're familiar with the Windows version of the data loader, this should be very similar. So once it's installed, there's a simple link in your applications folder, dataloader.app. Simply open that up like you would any other application, and then you'll see the very familiar UI that you're used to. This opening screen is kind of the jump page. If you cancel out, you'll have the main menu. But from here, you can go ahead, insert, update, upsert, delete, export, export all of the functions you can do through the data loader. So I'm going to just step us through a very quick example, nothing too complex here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload a bunch of accounts. So we'll go ahead and look at a view that I have now. Essentially, it's looking at all accounts that I have with a type of data loader. Right now, you'll see I have no records in there because I haven't run the load. We can simply go to insert, just like you would any other org, log in. Once you log in, again, this is very straightforward. You select your object, you select the CSV file that you would like to upload. My desktop, we have the data loader CSV. It'll initialize it. We should see about 4,100 records in there. I can then go ahead and create and edit my mapping, auto match so all my fields are matched correctly. Let's go OK, next. And where do I want to save my output? We'll go ahead and put it in this folder here, Enhancements, and go ahead and click Finish. Yes, I would like to proceed, and it will then proceed to start the insert of the records. Now you can see, just like the Windows data loader, it proceeds in batches of 200 where it can, and I'm getting a lot of successes and 0 errors, which is what I expect because it's a fairly straightforward data load. Now, as the loading proceeds, I can refresh this, and we'll see that the data is indeed getting loaded into Salesforce, just like we expected. Not a lot of surprises here. The biggest change is now you have an official supported version for Mac. So we didn't spend any time advancing the product right now as far as what is the feature set that the data loader can do. We really just wanted to get to a parity with what was in the Windows version so that we can deliver the same consistent features across both platforms. Next for the data loader is if you are doing any of the advanced command line or you wanted to see the installed examples of the data loader, it's a little different on Mac than on Windows. On Windows, it will install into a specific directory. On Mac, it's all set to the contents of the application you install. So if you go to your data loader inside of the applications, right-click, you'll see a Show Package Contents. When you open that, what you'll get to is a folder that will have the contents of all of the data inside. So if I look at the resources and the config files, you can see the config properties and the UI last run properties, which are used if you do any of the command line runs. You can also see the complete Java code that's included here, and any of the Mac OS resources. So it's fairly straightforward, very similar in usage. Like I said, nothing too different there. I did want to mention quickly some of the features that we're looking, or what is the future of data loader. We have started a new team inside of the platform division specifically focused on tools. So while the data loader today is just at a simple parity with the Windows version, over the next few releases, we will be significantly advancing the features. So you'll see some of those more groundbreaking changes that have been asked for over the past few years, adding different header support, changing the UI, upgrading the Java version, things like that. So that's definitely more to come type of situation, but please keep an eye out for those over the next couple releases. So moving on, one of the biggest things that we've been doing from the enterprise API side is really taking a step back and trying to figure out how we can make our APIs more accessible, more extensible, and ultimately work better for our customers. How can we make the APIs do more functionality at once while being more performant? This has really led us to this concept of a composite API. So a composite API, for those of you who aren't familiar, is an API that's built up by combining existing API functions. So taking those existing API calls you have, putting them together so that you can kind of build your own Lego blocks to create the application that you need. The orchestration of these composite APIs will allow your developers to control the business logic and functionality that they want, so they can start to link together different APIs together. So you might have a response from one call, one API call, be the parameters that feed into the next API call. So you can start to chain API calls together. The real reason behind this is to improve performance. So what we look for in these calls is to reduce the round trips that you have to make to the Salesforce server, potentially to allow business side logic to be done on the server side as opposed to the client side, to allow for, let us put our huge server set resources to doing some of that logic rather than having to do it on the client side. And really this helps mobile development. So anybody who's done a mobile API before, a mobile app, you know that the fewer round trips you have to make to an end resource, the better, because it takes time to not only send the request back and forth, but also to kind of serialize and deserialize that response. So the fewer responses we can give you, the better. So we've taken the step of how do we get to a very true composite API inside of Salesforce, and it is something that we want to make sure we take significant steps towards, but we don't want to just throw it out in the wrong way. So for the summer release, we've actually implemented two different abilities and resources. The first is the batching REST resource. So this was previously available for the Connect API for those of you who have done chatter resources. But the idea here is, rather than send 3, 4, or 5 calls and do 5 round trips to Salesforce against the REST API, let's give you the ability to send us once, we'll run all those calls in serial on our side, and then return you a single response. So we can batch up to 25 sub requests together, so you can send one request that can execute 25 different endpoints. Each sub request is an unrelated API call, so while we have the eventual goal to be able to link these calls together and take outputs from one and put them as inputs into another, we're not quite there yet. So each of these calls is completely separate. Like I mentioned, the sub requests are executed serial. They're also executed in order and executed as the running user. So really the goal here is just reduce the number of round trips. As each sub request completes, the call is committed, so we can actually have instances where if you submit 5 requests, the first one is successful, maybe the second one errors out, but then 3, 4, and 5 are successful. So you can have successes and non-successes intermingled with each other. Now we do have an option to say halt on error, so if you wanted to stop the entire process when it hits an error, you can do that. That's a flag you can pass in. And the response will be a JSON representation of all of the sub-responses. So you'll see what I mean in just a second. So the traditional diagram that we have laid out here, we have on the left the user, on the right, or in the middle the Salesforce REST endpoint, and on the right the Salesforce database. And this is what it would generally take prior to the summer release to make 3 calls: a create call, a describe call, and a call to the REST limits resource. So first, the user would make the create call. That goes to the REST endpoint. The REST endpoint sends a transport to the database where we do the processing, send the response to the endpoint, and the endpoint sends it back to the user. That's a little simplistic. Some other things go on, but that's really the general flow. Once the user receives the response from the create, they can then push in the describe. When they receive the response from the describe, they can push the request to limits, or they could also do it parallelly if they wanted it and manage those as separate threads. So that's the pattern we have today. definitely works. Not going to stop supporting that. But what we are going to do is give you the ability to send one request to say, do the create, describe, and limits. Once it comes to us, we then loop through each of those and process them on the Salesforce server side, and then return a single response. Generally, what we've seen performance-wise is on the order of 50 to 200% faster, depending on how many calls you put in and depending on what types of calls those are. And really what we're seeing is all of that time is spent during the serialization and deserialization. So having to build up a unique response, send it out to you, get the new response, dequeue it, deserialize it, and then process that. That's where all of our time is spent. So this is really the goal to help your mobile development or your REST development become more efficient. So I'm going to go through each of these on the actual live demo, but what we do is, what you'll see here is on the batch request, you'll submit a request that has the top level JSON object of batch request. Inside that object, there are sub-objects, each which will define the method, post, put, get, delete, head, the URL that you want to execute that method against, and then an optional rich input. So if you were doing a post or a patch, you can go ahead and define what data you want to put in. So as we see here in this example, we're creating an account with the post and the rich input. We're doing a describe to get the account, and then we're doing a get to pull the last 10 accounts that were created, all in one single call. Now, an example success response, what you'll see is the first thing, you have a has errors equals false, meaning there were no errors in the transmission. And then you'll have a JSON object of results. Now, each result responds to the order that the batches were put in. So that first one we'll see is a 201. It was a successful create of the account. Second was a status code of 200, which provides you the result of the describe. And the third is a 200 that provides you the result of the query. Now, each of the results, if you were to run these REST calls on their own, the result is what you would get back. So it's really just an array of the results that you would have gotten back if you made these one at a time. Now, an example of an unsuccessful batch response. Now, each one of these requests that I made was unsuccessful, but some could be successful, some could not be successful, depending on what you actually try to do. But the first thing you'll see is the has errors equals true. The result, then each of the results will give you your status code and the result message. So we see that I didn't include a name on the create, so I got an error. I couldn't access the resource in a batch request, so I sent it to a bad REST endpoint. And the third one, I ran a query with a bad field in the query. So that's an example. So we'll go ahead and do a demo here. Now, to do this demo, what I'm going to use is the Workbench tool. For those of you who have not seen this, this is a tool that's available on developer.force.com or developer.salesforce.com. If you go to workbench.developer.salesforce.com, you will get to this. And what it is it is a free tool that one of our developers put together that will allow you to do some of the API functions in addition to what you can do with the data loader. So you can do all of the describes, queries, CRUD operations, inserts, exports, etc. But then you can also do some metadata calls, and you can actually look at the REST Explorer. So the REST Explorer is fairly simple. You give the URL that you want to hit, and you execute it, and it will return the response. Now I'm going to switch to the 34.0 version. Execute that. So this is the 34 is the summer release here. And what I want to do is I want to go to that new endpoint that I have, which is under the resource is called Composite, and under there you'll see Composite Batch. Now I'm going to get a method not allowed here because I did a get, and batch supports post, because what you want to do again is you want to post that data into the REST resource. Go ahead and grab my batch resource here and paste it in. And we can go ahead and take a look at what I'm doing here. So this is the same example that I had showed you here. What I'm doing is I'm doing a post to an account. I'm going to create it with new name and an industry of tech. I'm then going to do a get and pull up the describe of the account, and then I want to do a get with a simple query getting me the last 10 accounts that were created. I could also, and I'll show you something in just a second. So if I go ahead and execute this, we'll see that I have has errors equals false, and I can then look at the results of each one that I did. So these results will return in the order of the methods that I submitted. So item 1 is that account create, item 2 is the describe, and item 3 is the query. And then I can go ahead and look at these results directly. You'll see I have no errors. I get an ID here where if I take this ID and go into Salesforce, I should be able to bring that ID up and see that new account that was created, new name with the industry of tech, very straightforward, nothing special in here. And this is the exact same thing that you could have done before. Difference is that I also am able to do a query on the account describe and then actually do a query on account records. One of those account records that comes back is that new name account that I submitted, and that is because we do submit these serially. So since this was created, this account was created before I ran the query, when I run the query, that account will come up. So in this way, what I can do, and for an example, is I can create this process to allow a customer to create an account on from their mobile device, not only create that account successfully, get a describe of all of the details of the account, so what should the account look like, what fields are available to the user, and then also get the results of that field as well, or that new record as well, so that I can display it to the end user in the correct form. So this is a fairly simplistic example that we have where we're just doing 3 results. You can batch up to 25 and run those all at the same time. We do have a limit to how long we'll let an entire batch process. So that limit is 10 minutes. If you try and process, if you put in, let's say, 25 requests, and that each request is going to take a minute to process, you will get an error after the 10th one saying, hey, you've exceeded your time. We're not going to process anything after this. Those first ones that do process do get committed, so they will complete. So it is up to you as the developer to make sure you're capturing any of the status codes and the results to make sure that you respond to the user correctly if something does go wrong. So as we go forward, we may relax that time restraint to higher than 10 minutes. Before we do that, I definitely want to see what the community does and see if it's needed to do that. So having an API process that runs 10 minutes, especially if you're on a mobile device, probably won't be a great mobile experience for your users. So even though you can do this, it still behooves you as a developer to think, should I do this, and what's the right way to do this? Okay, so moving on. The second beginning to composite APIs that we're doing is this idea of a tree save resource. The idea here is that one of the complaints that we heard from customers, especially when they're doing any kind of data migration, is that linking IDs and records together through the API can be a little difficult. So take, for example, if I have to create an account, 10 contacts under that account, 5 tasks associated with those contacts, and maybe 5 opportunities associated with the account. If I wanted to create that record tree inside Salesforce, what I have to do is I'd have to create the account first, get back the account ID so I can match it into each of those contacts and make sure that the contacts are parented to the right account. Then I'd have to insert all of my contacts, get the records back so that I can then associate the who ID in each of the activities and then update the activities, and so on and so forth. Really what we see at that point is it becomes a little hard to manage, and we want to make it easier for our customers. So what we have come up with TreeSave is it allows you to create these nested childs or these trees of records, all with the same root resource. So if I wanted to create a bunch of accounts with records under them, or alternatively I could create a bunch of custom objects with records under them, but I couldn't do both in the same call. But it's a recursive structure that first inserts the root records, inserts the second level, inserts the third level, et cetera, et cetera. So at the end, what you receive back from the call is, if everything is successful, you have created all of those records inside of Salesforce in one call, and Salesforce has done all of the ID mappings for you. So the request does have some limitations, just like everything else. But we've really tried to set these limits to be equivalent of what you see in other Salesforce API calls. So the maximum number of records you can insert at one time is 200 per call, which is what we have with the SOAP API. When we saw data loader, we saw it was inserting in groups of 200. So that remains the same. So you can insert 200 records per REST call. You can insert up to 5 different S-object types. So let's say I want to do accounts, contacts, opportunities, cases, and tasks. That would be great. That's 5. But if I also wanted to do events, that wouldn't work because that's 6. So you can only do 5 S-object types. And you can only go 5 levels deep. So you can go like the same thing, accounts, contacts, tasks, maybe a custom object, or maybe you have 5 custom objects deep. You can only do that, which that is the same as our SOCL relationship limitation. So you cannot chain relationship queries more than 5 levels deep. Now, you definitely could do something where if you needed 7 levels, you could create the first 5, and then from that response, the second request could create the final 2 levels. But the idea, again, is giving you the ability to create groups of records in a single call. So the way we do this is, and you'll see this in a second, but for each record that you're passing in, you as a developer provide a reference ID. So this reference ID is kind of your pseudo ID for the record before they're created on the Salesforce side so that you can link things together. We're also using this reference ID as we start to build out future functionality and how we can link records together. This is going to be kind of the unique identifier for that record while it's being processed for the API. Right now, only insert is supported, so you couldn't use the tree save to update records. We just wanted to first tackle insert. Any triggers, processes, workflow, they fire separately for each of the object levels. So what we do when we process this, if your top level is account and your second level is contact, what we do is we first insert all of the accounts, run all of the triggers, processes, and workflows for those accounts, and assuming everything is successful, the next step will be for us to insert all of the second level records, which are contacts. For that, we then go ahead and run all the contact triggers, processes, workflows, etc. Then we would move on to the third level. So this is very similar to if you were creating it yourself. You'd create the accounts, everything would be run. After you receive the response, you'd then create the contacts, all the processing would be run, etc. So we're just taking away that ability for you, or the need for you to pass each level by yourself. Also, this is an all or none functionality. So if one record fails inside the entire batch, we roll everything back because we don't want to get into a situation where you have dependencies that weren't created because of a specific error. We're looking at ways to expand this in the future, safe harbor, where we can do partial updates, but for now it's all or none. Now, if you do receive an error on that, this is where the reference ID will come in handy, because what we do is on the error response, we tell you what reference ID had the error so that you can go back and either remove that section of the tree or correct any errors and resubmit. So again, this is where it's up to the developer to take the appropriate action. We want to provide you all of the information you need to take that action. So again, I'll give you some examples and then we'll step through it. But just like we saw with the batch, essentially what you're passing to the Salesforce REST resource is a JSON object of all of the records you want to create. There is a new attributes section to each of these JSON objects where you define the type of record you're creating, and you also give it your specific reference ID. So this can be named whatever you want. In this example, we have this first top-level account is being labeled with reference 1. You then have the rest of the JSON object of all of the fields you want to set. And additionally, you can then have a set of sub-records. So in this case, contacts. So the contacts on the account that we want to create. Here we have another array of all these contacts. You'll see ref2 and ref3 are specific to different records. And then you can have another top-level object account using ref4. Now, the way we actually do the relationships, you'll see this is contacts. This is done through the describe. So every child relationship can be set with a relationship name. The standard ones, such as the account to contact relation or the account to task relation or account to case, those all have standard names like contacts or cases or opportunities, things like that. If you create your own, when you're going through the Salesforce setup wizard, what you'll see is a name will end with an underscore underscore R. So as long as there is that relationship set that we can traverse, you can create them as sub-records. If you haven't created that relationship or you didn't give it a name, we're unable to traverse it. So when you go through the setup, there is a step that says, what do you want the child relationship name to be? And you'll give it that name. So that's when you go through that. And I'll show you that in a minute as well. So we'll see the example successful response from that record that we just passed. You'll see we have ref1, ref4, ref2, and ref3. All of them were created. And the results is you get the reference and the ID. Now, the thing to notice here, you'll see that the way it was passed back to us, we have ref1 and then ref4. If we remember from that previous slide, ref1 was the account. Ref4 was the second account. So this highlights how we create everything, every top level object first, every second level object second, every third level object third, etc. So we have ref1 and 4 were created together, the responses returned together. 2 and 3, which were both contacts, were created together and they're returned together. It is up to you as a developer to make sure that the references that we return, you're able to manage those and connect them with the correct information that you passed in. So you would need to be able to say, oh, ref4, here's that ID. Let me link it with the data that I pulled back. An example unsuccessful response, this is from that same 4 records I inserted. You'll see that the has errors equals true. I only receive a single result, which shows me that ref4 had an error, provides me the error that I hit here. I didn't provide the right field in the create. And because of that, I didn't save any of the references 1, 2, or 3. So everything was rolled back, and we just returned the record that error. So as a developer, it'd be up to me to change this, provide the name for that 4th record, and then go ahead and resubmit. So jumping into a tree save demo, I actually have a few demos here, but we'll step through them. So the first one we want to do is let's go ahead and look at saving 5 objects. So let me pop back into the workbench. Now, the resource that you post to, remember we had, if we do a git on the composite again, we have 2 resources, tree and batch. We're going to use tree this time. Now, what you'll see if you do a git against a tree, it'll tell you, hey, what you have to pass it in is a tree / the entity name. So where you post your payload to will be the top level resource that you want to create. So if you want to create top level accounts, your endpoint would be tree / account. If you wanted to create a custom object as a top level, you would put in the custom object name. We are going to be putting in accounts, and we're going to post to it. And here we'll see the data that I'm posting. Again, I believe I'm creating 5 records here, or I'm creating an account with 5 child records. That's actually what I'm doing. So I have a account. I'm passing in all of the account information. So it's going to be named sample account, website, employees, etc. I then have contacts associated with that. So Chris Smith and Matt Evans are the 2 contacts I'm passing in. And you'll notice the reference IDs that I use here are a little more named correctly for me. So this reference ID is for account 1. For my 2 contacts, I have reference contact 1, contact 2. Just a little easier for me to track it as I'm running through. I also want to create opportunities against that account. So I have opportunity 1, opportunity 2. I have a prospecting and a qualified with an amount on the qualified. I want to create tasks on my account. So the first task, I met with Matt Evans, it's completed. I met with him today. And then I want to also create a follow-up for 1 month from today. The fifth object I want to create under my account is 2 events. So I met with Matt Evans today from 12 to 1 p.m. And I want to schedule that follow-up for next month from 12 to 1 with Chris Smith. So those are all of the records I want to create. Oh, and I'm sorry. And then I have a second account that I want to create with no child records. That's just account 2. So at the end of this, I should have 12 records total, 2 accounts, 2 contacts, 2 opportunities, 2 tasks, and 2 events. Go ahead and execute this. We'll see that I have no errors, which is great. It means it was all successful. I have the 10 items that were created, account 1, account 2, event 1, event 2, contact 1, contact 2, etc. Now again, key to note that since event, contact, task, and opportunity are all children to accounts, they can be created in any specific level. I wasn't doing a depth hierarchy. I was doing 2-level hierarchies, but you'll see that I create the groups of records together. So this should be a task on 8, and this should be an opportunity on 10. And then if I go ahead and look at my account 1, we should see where all the magic is. Go ahead and look here. We'll see my account, sample account, all of the information I passed in, and then we'll see all of the specific records I created. So my 2 contacts, Matt Evans, Chris Smith, my 2 opportunities, prospecting and qualified. Qualified has a $10,000 setup. I have open activities. I have a task and an event that were open, and I have 2 closed activities, an event and a task. So what I've done here in a single call is to pass everything in and return it. Now, what we've seen with performance around the tree save is we don't see a whole lot of performance improvement as you would if you created these yourself. But where the performance improvement happens is on the client side. So generally, if you were to do this, you'd create account 1, then the client would have to get that account ID, get it into the events and contacts to create, and then submit those requests. So the actually processing on the server side of each record is no faster, but where you gain improvement is not having to do any client-side logic to paste the IDs and do all of the ID mapping yourself. Okay, so we have another example. So that was 5 records. If we look at a similar thing, what I want to do is I want to do 5 levels deep. So here I have a very deep one, and what I have is 5 custom objects, very simply named first level, second level, third level, fourth level, and fifth level. No fields in them, they're all auto number fields, but we'll see is under my first level, I create a second level. Here's that custom relationship I was mentioning. Under my second level, I have a third level. Under third, I have fourth. And under fourth, I have fifth. I'm just creating 5 records here. And because I'm creating this against the first level, I no longer post to my account as object. I'm posting this to my custom object. I go ahead and execute this. Hopefully, I have no errors. I have 5 results. If I look at item 1, which is the first, and then open this inside of Salesforce, I should see, okay, first level record, I have 1 associated second level has 1 third level has 1 fourth level has 1 fifth level. So I've been able to create 5 levels deep, all in one straight call, not having to do any ID mapping myself. The final example, and this is fairly exciting from my point of view, is the idea of, since we can now create multiple top-level records, what you get the option to do is to create collections in the bulk, or batch REST API, sorry, collections in the REST API. Previous to the summer 15 release, you could only create a single record at a time. You could only create 1 account, then a second account, next call, third account, 3 calls later, third call, etc. But now, because I can create top-level accounts and I can create up to 200 records in a single call, I can actually create 200 accounts in a single batch call. So let's go ahead and paste this in. We'll switch back to the account. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just creating 200 accounts. Probably not the best way to show this, but I apologize. Get all the way back up to the top. And we'll see I'm doing account 1, it's named test collection 1, account 2 is test collection 2, et cetera, et cetera. I have a view. We'll go ahead and look at my test collections, which should be empty at this point. I haven't created any records. And then we'll go ahead and actually paste those records in or execute this call. Go ahead and execute it. Results, I should have 200 successful results, all 200. And then if I go back to my account and refresh that, what we'll see is we'll see all of those 200 records were created at once. So this will give you the ability to start doing more efficient requests inside of the Salesforce REST API. So you don't have to do 200 records, but if you wanted to do 5 or 10 records at a time, whether they're all at the same top level or whether they're nested records together, now you have the ability to do so. And we'll get back into the demo here. So, like I said, we're building towards this composite API on Salesforce. There's a number of existing composite ways you can do it. So through Apex REST, you can actually build up your own API with your own business logic and put it behind a single API, Apex REST endpoint. That's available today. We're not changing that. It's still going to be available. So continue to use that where appropriate. The batching REST call that I went through will allow you to do unrelated calls. It'll reduce the number of round trips, tree save, allow multiple records in a single call. It's limited to insert and all or none saves. Keep that in mind. Now, in the future, Safe Harbor, we will be adding additional resources and additional functionality here. So the ability to take these 3 types of calls, start to intermingle them together. Like I said earlier, take outputs from one result, pass them as inputs into another result, give you the ability to do multiple lookup relationships in a single call, etc. But that is in future-looking technology, so it's just kind of a sneak peek at what we're looking to do. Now, the last piece I wanted to talk about was the Lightning Connect Salesforce connector. So this is a admin-focused feature. However, it is built on top of our Lightning Connect framework and the Salesforce REST API. This feature is GA with the summer release, so I wanted to touch on it. So the problem that this is trying to address is sharing data between multiple organizations. You have multiple orgs, you have users that exist in multiple orgs, but you really need to deliver that 360-degree view to all of your end users. Your end users need to know if a record exists in their service org or in their sales org, so that they, when they call the customer, when they're talking to the customer, they can kind of get that full picture of everything that's going on. Traditionally, to do this, you've had to build your own API integrations, use features like Salesforce to Salesforce, and try and fit it into your specific use cases. And we're really trying to tackle this idea of sharing the data virtually. So since this is a admin-focused feature, even though it is using the API, all of the setup for this is done through the UI, through the setup pages. So it's really a low bar to set up these connections. It's point and click, set up in minutes. You virtualize the data from one org to another, so we don't actually do copying of data like you would see inside of Salesforce to Salesforce. We simply query for that data at runtime. The customer can declare and manage their connections individually from the receiving org. And it allows you, like I said, to get that complete view of your data. Sorry about the little overlap on text here, but it really is, how do you give that complete view of the customer? So some of the features here, like I said, we can easily create these connections. If you've used or tried Lightning Connect, this is the same exact setup. The only difference is the type of connector you use is a Salesforce connector as opposed to an OData connector. When you connect to the third-party system, every object that user can see can be brought down in. It's a simple point and click to sync, and then we map all of the data, metadata, into the third party or into your subscriber org. Now, it's key to note that these records that you see inside Salesforce, they are Salesforce records, even though they exist in a different organization. So because they are Salesforce records, you get all the benefit of the Salesforce system administration. So you can create links between records, you can rename fields, you can hide fields from users, you can create different page layouts, etc. So you can really deliver a custom experience to each of your users. So I'll go through a quick demo here. Now what I have is I do have two orgs. I have my sales org that we're looking at here and that we've been using for the past few minutes. Whoa, I don't want to open Cisco Jabber, sorry. And then I have a second org that is my services org. So this is a very common use case. What we see customers that have their salespeople with their own org where they manage the business relationships, and then they may also have a service cloud org where any customer issues get called in, but these orgs are separate. Now, in this specific scenario, what we're going to say is the administrator of the sales org or the user of the sales org is talking to their customer, and they need to be able to see, does this customer have any open issues in my service org? Traditionally, this was a little harder to do, so we'll show you how easy it is with the Salesforce connector. So there is a new data source capability here. You'll see I've already set this up in the interest of time, but we'll look at this. I'm naming it service case to indicate that this is cases coming from my service org. The type is Lightning Connect Salesforce. Could be one of the other available types, but we're connecting Salesforce orgs. When you're setting it up, you have the ability to determine where you're connecting to. Is it a production URL? Is it a sandbox, pre-release, custom URL, etc. if you're using a My Domains. You can choose the API version that you use and how long you'll wait for any timeouts during calls. 120 seconds is the recommended. One of the other powerful features here is this include in Salesforce searches. So what this allows you to do is through your global search inside of your sales org in this example, I can actually search for cases that exist in my service org. So we provide search capabilities across both orgs. And then you choose what type of authentication you want. Do you want every user to authenticate as the same user into the service org, or does everybody have their own individual login into the service org? So this is a decision that your admin has to make. It depends on what type of sharing controls you want to have. Do you want to have sharing controls at the service org level? Do you want sharing controls at the sales org level? Do you want both, etc.? We'll see that I'm using a named principal. I'm choosing to use password authentication, but I could use OAuth 2.0. And you'll see I'm logging into the Acme service. Acme service is my org that I'm logging into. Once you go ahead and sync up, it's a simple matter of clicking Validate and Sync, where you get the option to choose any records that my named principal user can see inside of the system. Now, I am only syncing up cases, but I could choose any of these to sync up. Once you sync them up, you'll then have a new case type inside of, or a new object, external object inside of your Salesforce org. Here you'll see I have the new service case. It's tagged with an __X because this is an external object. And then it brings down all of those case fields into my sales org. So you'll see all of these fields here. Now, since these are created as kind of external objects, you'll see everything is labeled with an __C because it is a custom field inside of my Salesforce sales org. And anything that was a custom field is actually tagged with an _C, __C. It's just a naming convention that we use. The final thing that I wanted to do is I want to be able to link all of the existing cases in my service org with accounts in my sales org. To do this, I simply changed the account ID field that was brought down. I changed it to a data type of indirect lookup, which is a new field type. So if I'm not going to go through these steps, but indirect lookup. Now this is a way to build a relationship from an external object into an object internal to your org. And then I gave it a name and I simply added it to my records. The last thing I did was a target field, so you have to say what field on the record in my sales org will map to the account ID in my service org. So this is where the admin setup happens. So I have a custom field on my account called service account ID, and we can go ahead and look at one of those before I show you everything. So look at all accounts. So we'll pop open Burlington Text textiles, you'll see I have this service account ID field, which is an account ID that I've populated. This account maps to the account ID in the other org. You can use any external ID you'd like. I chose ID, and then I basically say the account ID coming from the service org should match to this target field on my existing accounts in the sales org, so that's how the mapping is done. The result of that is when I look at my account details here, you'll see I have this new service cases details. Now this is a case that's being brought in from an external org, shown inside of Salesforce on my sales org. You can open it up, see details about that case, and go forward. And just to show you that everything is on the up and up, we'll see service cases. I'm going against this ID, so we'll pop back into my other service org and just add a new case here. Should be Burlington Textiles. You'll see I have two cases. We'll go ahead and do a new one. Jack Rogers. Case origin phone, subject, test webinar. Go ahead and save this. So I have a new case inside of my service org, refresh the page inside of my sales org, and we'll see that I now have that test webinar. It's instantly available because we run it at runtime. So just a quick example, dive into the Salesforce for Lightning Connect. So back to our presentation, wrapping up, rounding third. So the Salesforce connector versus Salesforce to Salesforce, there are a number of differences. The biggest difference is the fact that how the data is accessed. With the Salesforce connector, it's accessed by reference, meaning it's virtualized. With Salesforce to Salesforce, it's actually copied between the existing orgs. So I'm not going to go through these bullet by bullet, but needless to say, there is still different times when you want to use S to S versus Salesforce connector. Definitely work with your account rep to determine when is the best time and when do you want to use which feature. Now, this is available in Summer 15. It's automatically enabled in all new Developer Edition orgs, so you can definitely kick the tires. It is an add-on for EE, PXE, and UE accounts. For details, please contact your account executive. So the roadmap for the Lightning Connect, this is all safe harbor, pilot or future looking, full CRUD capabilities for virtualized objects, so giving you the ability to write to your external object from your subscriber, or supports for reports and dashboards, allowing you to run reports against external objects, and the ability to take action on the subscribed data. So using workflow, triggers, process builder, etc. Those are all on our roadmap. Okay, before we get to the Q&A, I definitely want to introduce Trailhead. For those of you who are not aware, Trailhead is our new help and training experience. So giving your users kind of a great intro and example into how to do different application development or Salesforce development or Salesforce administration through very interactive designing and specific learning paths. So you can go to developer.salesforce.com/trailhead and get started today. We have a ton of free online tutorials through Udacity. We have developer workshops, experienced app builders. Please take a look at all of our existing tutorials online as well. We have the Developer Zone at the Salesforce World Tour in New York City coming up next week on June 18th. You can definitely register at the bit.ly here, SWT NYC Reg. And we also have future ones coming in EMEA in June and July. We have an Elevate workshop June 25th in San Francisco. Register early, seating is limited. bit.ly/DevDays workshop. Finally, next week's upcoming webinar is a deep dive into Apex triggers. So you can always see our existing and future webinars at developer.salesforce.com/calendar. And finally, it's very crucial that you provide feedback. Tell us what you liked about these webinars, what you didn't like, how can we improve them? Did we go too deep, not deep enough? Feeds back to me so I can know how I'm doing. So for this one, please feel free to go to bit.ly/API-summer15. So now for our Q&A. So I'm going to be reading some of these that came in. Is the OS X version of the Apex data loader now fully tested in GA and ready for prime time? If so, how do we get it? So the answer to all of those is yes, it is ready, it is GA, and it is available in the Summer 15 orgs. So if I go ahead, and I should have shown this, thanks for reminding me. If we go into setup, in the same place that you downloaded the data loader before, it's under data management data loader. We'll now see a second link. We have the data loaders for Windows and data loader for Mac. So it will download a DMG file. It's a simple install process to get up and running. It is GA. It is supported. Feel free to use it. What are the benefits of data loader for Mac versus Lexi Loader? So Lexi Loader is essentially the same app. There are some key differences. Lexi Loader was a side project that was built by a couple of developers here. The biggest difference is supportability. So Lexi Loader was not supported. If you have existing versions, we cannot support it. We can support the data loaders for Mac. The second ability is full parity with the existing Windows version. So there was always a little bit of gap between the Lexi Loader version and the Windows version because it depended on when the developers building Lexi Loader decided to put out the new version. So the supported way is this version through Data Loader for Mac. If you're happy with Lexi Loader and you're using it now, there's no need to upgrade if you don't want to. If I have some solutions with attachments, will the data loader create knowledge articles, fac_KAV, and maintain the HTML formatting and bring over the attachments? So we do have limited support for attachments through the data loader. You can upload blob files specifically with the knowledge articles. However, there are preferred ways to do knowledge article versions through the API, and the data loader is not specifically designed for that. So I definitely look at help and training, contact your support team if you have questions on what the best way to do that is. I'm not a knowledge expert on their specific fields, but I know you can do it through the REST API and other APIs that they have exposed. Data loader likely can do it, probably not the best solution initially. Why did it take so long for iOS platform support? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Essentially, what we saw was there was not initially, we didn't have a large percentage of our customers using iOS. It was around under 5% of our total customer base, so it was just a simple numbers game. And then going forward, it was really about supportability. We just did not have the expertise on the team to accurately support it, so it took a while for us to get that expertise and get it built. Like I said, there is a new tools team that is focused on data loader and other tools, so this was kind of the jump start for that to get them started, get the feature out there, get it out there, and get people using it. Okay, moving on to batch API. If you send a batch request with 10 requests, does that count as one API call or 10? So this will count actually as 11, one for the batch call and one for each of the sub requests. So while this is the feature is built, the batching feature is built for performance and allow you to do fewer round trips, it is not necessarily meant to reduce the number of API calls. We're looking at ways to do that. It's just not available quite yet. So I would look forward to seeing limits being addressed in the future, but not for the Summer 15 release. In the URL for the REST call, I notice it started with v34. Does the dev of the native app using REST have to update the URL to use newer versions of REST in the future? So with the batch REST resource, the tree save resource, those are available with version 34 and above. So if you want to take advantage of it, you have to use that most recent version, or at least version 34 or later. If you try to hit those with version 33, you'll get an error saying the resource does not exist. So this is a versioned API. It will not exist in previous versions. It will only exist in future. Let's see. For long-running REST API requests, is there any Salesforce internal screen to see the progress, like the Apex job screen and background jobs? No, there is not. Generally, the reason behind this is Apex jobs can run for a long time, multiple minutes. For Apex, for the batch REST, we have just a smaller time, and it wouldn't make sense for you to run a request, then go somewhere else to check the progress and return to the request. It is a synchronous call, so the flow just doesn't make sense there. So any feedback is definitely appreciated on what we can do. Will tree save work properly for person accounts? So tree save works for all standard accounts and custom objects. It will work. The one thing to recognize is currently tree cannot do multiple parent lookups. So if you have a field that has a master detail to account and a master detail to a custom object, you cannot associate it with two parents. It's a single parent relationship only. As we move forward, using that reference ID that I highlighted, we're looking at different ways to improve that. But yes, it should work with the parents for no reason. Just a couple more questions before we end up here. With the tree save, if I pass 200 records, does it use 200 API calls or one API call? This will actually use a single API call. So unlike the batch request where you're physically giving us multiple different API calls, the tree save will give you a single call. So it's creating a single batch of records, just like the SOAP API. And finally, I'm going to go, it looked like we could call Apex REST in that last slide instead of the Composite API. Is this just, or is Apex REST just a feature that supports Composite REST? So my point on that last slide was how Salesforce allows you to do composite-like requests. Apex REST is one way to do it, separate from the batch resource that we saw, separate than the tree save resource. Those are kind of the three that are available today. As we move forward, look to see us designing ways to intermingle those together. That's not quite available yet. So one question from Lightning Connect, just to be thorough here. When Lightning Connect to external orgs, can you access the remote data programmatically to copy it locally? Is it available to see through the API? Absolutely, I didn't touch on this, but it is available through the API. I'll show you an example of that here. Again, we're using the REST. Let's go ahead and go to SObjects. Do a get and execute. What we'll see is, SObjects helps to spell it correctly. What we'll see in the SObjects, we should see an __x under service case. Service case __x. URLs, we can do things like describe it, so you can get all of the information about that, or you can also query it. So if I go ahead and do a query, hopefully that works. No, what is it? Oh, it's SObjects. Let's actually go to the right resource. Thank you, Ruben. You'll see that I'm able to bring down records that come down. So you can access external records through the API just like any other records. You can also access them through Apex and Visualforce. So you definitely could build a process to query data from one source and just copy it into your other source. You can do that programmatically and manually now. In the future, we're also looking at ways to easily make that translation possible. So with that, we're a few minutes over. I would like to thank everybody for your time. Hopefully this was valuable. Again, please fill out the survey, bit.ly/API-summer15 for any comments, feedbacks, and suggestions for future webinars. Thanks again.